This is The World This Weekend. Hello, I'm Stephanie Skandaris. An invasion of Gaza by land, sea, and air. That's what Israel is promising in the next stage of its war with Hamas.
The goal is to destroy Hamas' governing capability and military capabilities completely.
Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is spiraling as food and basic supplies are running out. And there's now a fourth Canadian confirmed killed in the attack by Hamas on Israel. Also coming up, Australia has rejected an Indigenous voice to Parliament in a landmark referendum. That's later, but first. An invasion appears imminent. Israel's retaliation for attacks by Hamas last weekend could soon enter its next stage. It'll be a massive and potentially lengthy offensive. Hundreds of thousands of Gazans have fled southward before the anticipated invasion. Paul Hunter reports from Jerusalem.
Said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today, meeting with soldiers near the border with Gaza. Are you ready for the next stage? Netanyahu today toured two of the small communities where Israelis were massacred a week ago by Hamas militants. The horrifying attacks have gutted this country and have now sparked a war. The Israeli Defense Force today described that next stage. What it says will be a coordinated assault by land, sea, and air. Precise timing remains unknown, but it promises to be brutal, bloody, and long-lasting. Today, as new video emerged of the Hamas atrocities that left 1,300 Israelis dead, word that Israeli soldiers have now killed one of the commanders of those attacks. The militant had been one of those released by Israel in 2011 in a prisoner exchange for a captured Israeli soldier. There's also word those Israeli raids into Gaza this week recovered the bodies of some of those 150 hostages taken during the attacks. The fate of the others remains a mystery. Meanwhile, throughout Gaza today, Israeli airstrikes continued. In the past week, more than 2,000 Palestinians have been killed, including hundreds of children, as a tightened Israeli blockade has left Gaza's 2 million Palestinians without fresh food, water, medicine, power, or fuel. The humanitarian crisis is staggering. And then there's that warning from Israel to evacuate northern Gaza, sending hundreds of thousands to the already overcrowded south, where shelters are beyond jammed, countless now sleeping in the streets. And at Rafah, where there's a crossing into Egypt and now the only potential way out of Gaza, the doors are closed. An agreement to allow foreign nationals, including more than 150 Canadians still inside Gaza, fell apart, at least for now. A young girl from Britain is among those trying to get out. She'd been in Gaza visiting family and is now trapped.
Every place I go run away, and I just find bombs and I find dead people. And like maybe one day I'll end up like them, but it's a really scary thing for me.
All of this as everyone now waits for everything to get worse. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Now, ahead of that expected land invasion of Gaza, tensions are also high on the other end of Israel, on its northern border with Lebanon. It's been the scene of several clashes between Israeli forces and Iranian-backed militias, including Hezbollah. Among those killed, a Reuters journalist, and several other journalists were injured. Freelance reporter Rebecca Collard is in Beirut, and I spoke to her earlier. Rebecca, there was a journalist killed on the border. I understand that you knew him and that this must be a really difficult day for you. What do we know about what happened?
You know, Stephanie, I think today was hard for, of course, all of everybody that knew Issam Abdallah, but also all of his colleagues and all the journalists here in Lebanon. I just want to paint a picture for you what today was like after that attack yesterday. He, of course, died in the attack, but other journalists were injured, and one of them was injured quite severely. So today, as his funeral was being held in his village south of Beirut, many of us were planning to attend the funeral. And then there was a message sent to our journalist group saying that Christina Assi, who was a AFP, that's the French news agency photographer, who was really badly injured in that attack yesterday, was going to surgery and required a lot of blood. So I had to make this really tough decision about whether I go to the funeral or I go to donate blood to this other colleague. If you could imagine that, people today having to make that sort of decision, and it gives you an idea. I think it's affecting a lot of journalists here, of course. The Lebanese government is saying they're going to make a formal complaint to the United Nations. There's calls for an investigation. We know that these journalists were killed by Israeli shells. We know that they were very well marked. There's social media posts where you can see they are wearing press vests. They are wearing all kinds of insignia to really identify themselves as journalists. And they were also standing together, which is something that journalists will often do in a situation like this, to make it very clear to any military powers, any fighters, that this is a group of journalists who is observing and they are not fighters. So I think because of that, the Lebanese government has called this a deliberate attack, and many people here do feel that these journalists were actually targeted. The Israelis have said that they are going to conduct an investigation. But I can tell you, talking to people here, journalists and colleagues, very few people have faith in that investigation.
Wow. Okay. I mean, yes, as you're saying, we know that they would have been marked as the press, so that's quite shocking to hear. What is the mood like in Lebanon?
In the last week, obviously, since this Hamas attack on southern Israel, there has been sporadic volleys of fire across the Lebanon southern border with Israel. And of course, things here are quite tense. Some villages in the border have actually been evacuated. So people here are definitely nervous. And I think that since this conflict started between Israel and Hamas, this has been the big question about whether or not something will start in Lebanon. And that is because, of course, Hezbollah, which is the most powerful military actor here, much more powerful than the Lebanese army, has already fought a month-long war in 2006 with Israel. That war left more than 1,000 Lebanese dead, more than 150 Israelis dead. And I think that people here are obviously nervous about going through something like that again. And I think the real concern here, and when I'm talking to people tonight in Lebanon, is the Israeli ground invasion into Gaza. It seems imminent. It seems that it will start very soon. And the fear is that that is what will kick off tensions on Israel's northern border with Hezbollah, and that will be the start of a flare-up here.
Rebecca, I know that you know Lebanon really well. You've worked there for many years. Thank you for capturing the mood at this really challenging time, and thank you for speaking with us.
You're welcome.
Freelance reporter Rebecca Collard in Beirut. Well, you heard from Rebecca there about the fears in Lebanon about Hezbollah joining the conflict. To learn more about some of the diplomacy happening behind the scenes to prevent the conflict from spreading, I spoke to Peter Armstrong. He's CBC's former correspondent in Jerusalem, and he spoke to us earlier. Peter, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on a tour of Israel's neighbors in an effort to stem the crisis. How is that going?
It's been a busy time, right? He's in Saudi Arabia tonight. He met with the president of the UAE today. He was in Jordan yesterday, where he met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. He's trying to do his bit, but there's also all of these other foreign ministers, including the German foreign minister, Canada's foreign minister, all in the region, really just desperately trying to keep this catastrophe from spilling over. Usually at this stage of the conflict, you have diplomats in the region scurrying from neighboring country to neighboring country, trying to convince Israel to show restraint as it prepares for a ground invasion when it does head into Gaza. Not so much this time. Right now, the message is really along that main track of preventing the spread of this conflict. We've seen some small skirmishes on the northern border between Israel and Lebanon. Nobody wants to see contagion that would open up a second frontier. Hezbollah has reportedly like 150,000 rockets along that border. So the just about all of the diplomatic efforts are really focused primarily, at least, on keeping that contagion from happening.
And the other major regional power here with a message is Iran, which has close ties to Hezbollah. So what do we know about where Iran stands in all this?
It's such an important question. And just late this afternoon, Axios had a bit of a scoop reporting that there's been a message sent from Iran to Israel. It's coming via the very well-known and very well-respected Israeli journalist Barak Ravid, who works at Axios. And he says he's spoken with two diplomatic sources with knowledge of this message. Iran's foreign minister reportedly met with the UN Middle East envoy in Beirut. The UN envoy kind of urging that spillover effect, saying let's make sure we don't see this spread into a wider Middle East conflict. And I'm just going to quote from the piece here. The Iranian foreign minister replied that Iran doesn't want the conflict to turn into a regional war and wants to try to help with the release of civilians who are being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza. But he stressed that Iran has its red lines. He said that if the Israeli military operation continues, and especially if Israel follows through with its promise of a ground offensive, Iran, he says, will have to respond according to the sources. So there's some really interesting developments there.
And there is, of course, a humanitarian crisis right now in Gaza, with hundreds of thousands of people in the north fleeing south after Israel told them to leave ahead of that expected ground operation. At the same time, food and basic supplies are running out. What do we know about the diplomatic efforts to provide relief?
Two main ones. One is to get aid in, and the other is to get foreign nationals out. And frankly, not a lot of progress on either of those right now. Israel isn't letting almost anything through the Rafah crossing in the south. And there was some talk that they could get people out, but that too now appears to have been shut down.
Okay, Peter, thank you so much.
You bet.
Peter Armstrong there, CBC's former Middle East correspondent. Well, a fourth Canadian is confirmed to be among those killed in Israel in the attacks by Hamas last week. That news coming as Canadians fleeing Israel have started to arrive back home. But as Paul Hunter noted earlier, there are more than 150 Canadians in Gaza, and right now they have no way to leave. For Con now on the calls from their family and friends to get them out.
Shabbat Shalom. At Toronto's Pearson International Airport, Federal Cabinet Minister Yara Sachs welcomes the first group of evacuees from Israel.
We will keep continuing flights as long as there is a demand to do so.
281 Canadians were on that flight that arrived last night. Kinneret Butterfield Morrison was one of them. She says she's relieved to be reunited with her children, but she's still worried about her family in Israel.
So I kept thinking, thank God my kids aren't here, because the trauma that the kids are feeling there, that was the worst.
6 planes carrying Canadians have left Israel so far. However, Canadians in Gaza are stuck and have no way to escape. Foreign Minister Melanie Joly is in Jordan meeting political leaders and trying to secure a safe passage for them.
We have, like I mentioned, the authorization from the part of the Israeli government for Canadians to be able to leave Gaza. There are around 40 families, 160 people that are Canadians and their relatives that were seeking to secure safe passage.
Rola Baker is a Palestinian Canadian from Moncton, New Brunswick. She says her family is taking shelter in the grounds of a hospital in northern Gaza.
There is no word to describe what's going. I barely connect to them. Yesterday, I just spoke to her. Till now, I can't connect to one of my family. If I see either they're still alive or they die, I don't know.
As families await news from Gaza, there were multiple pro-Palestinian rallies across Canada today. In PEI, Rania Ismail came out to support people whose families are caught in the conflict.
Yeah, there are Palestinians here who has some families still there in Gaza Strip. They're not hearing from them. There is no power, there is no internet, and they are all feeling bad. They are scared.
It is not known if any Canadians have died in Gaza. At least 4 Canadians have been killed in Israel. The family of 22-year-old Shir Georgi confirmed her death today. She was killed when Hamas militants attacked a music festival last weekend. 3 Canadians are still missing. For Khan, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, in other news now, federal New Democrats have given Jagmeet Singh a sound endorsement at the party convention in Hamilton today. Singh defended his decision to cooperate with Liberals, a source of some criticism inside the party, and that wasn't the only issue up for debate. David Thurton brings us the details.
Ahead of a key vote on his leadership, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh acknowledged that not all New Democrats are happy with his agreement with the Liberals.
Now, I know that some of you like me have had the question, why are you working with Justin Trudeau when he's doing such a bad job?
It's been more than a year since Singh and the Liberals signed the Confidence and Supply Agreement, a deal where New Democrat MPs agreed to supply Liberals with enough votes to pass key pieces of legislation. In return, the Liberals advanced key NDP platform planks. Singh acknowledges it hasn't been easy, but thanks to the deal, he says, the NDP has advanced dental care, and by the end of this year, they hope to lay the groundwork for universal single-payer pharmacare.
This is going to be a fight, but it is a fight that I know you and I are ready for.
It's been a fight because New Democrats say they're pushing the Liberals to table a pharmacare bill that they say paves the way for a true single-payer universal system. After that speech, the results on his leadership review. Singh won with 81% support, down from 87% at the last convention. As far as Singh was concerned, it was a vote of confidence in him and the work he and his caucus are doing.
I received a strong mandate, which makes it clear that our work is appreciated and we need to keep on working hard.
Singh says the party needs to keep working hard to take on the Liberals in the next election, whom he says are out of touch after being in power for 8 years.
I am so worried about the Canadians that are right now saying they're afraid they might lose their home, rents are going up, costs of groceries are so high, and so the Liberals are out of touch.
Liberal MP Ekwinder Gahir, who attended the convention, acknowledges there is fatigue with the Liberal Party. But he says voting out his government might mean voters may inadvertently elect a conservative government led by Pierre Poilievre.
But I think people should realize that you are not voting an individual out, you're also voting an individual in. And do they agree with Poilievre, and do they agree with his politics and his scorched earth approach? And they should really see what they're going to be voting in as well.
As the NDP convention continues this evening, delegates will vote on resolutions, some contentious, including the party's position on Israel's war with Hamas.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Some delegates who disrupted the proceedings want the party to come out strong in support of Palestinian rights. Others want a middle-of-the-road approach condemning both the militant group and Israel's military action. David Thurton, CBC News, Hamilton.
Australians have voted no in a historic referendum that would have recognized First Nations people in the Constitution and given them a direct voice to Parliament in the form of an Indigenous Advisory Board for policies that affect them. Almost 60% of voters rejected the voice. That result after a fractious campaign that brought to light some ugly divisions in Australian society. Freelance reporter Peter Hadfield has more on that from Sydney.
That is a disgraceful thing to say. You should be debating the referendum because the truth, that is not true.
In a country famous for its easygoing nature, this weekend's referendum has exposed underlying tensions in Australia on issues of race and Indigenous rights. The question seemed simple enough. Do you agree with having an Indigenous Advisory Council called The Voice written into the Constitution? Indigenous leader Noel Pearson.
It's saying, put us in the Constitution. Give us an ability to make representations to the Parliament about the laws and policies made about us. And that is the kind of recognition that we seek to be part of the Australian Commonwealth.
But despite strong support for The Voice early on, public opinion soon shifted in favour of no. From the start, the No campaign raised concerns about the wording of the referendum question and about how exactly The Voice would work. Opposition politician Michaela Cash.
The one thing I say to all Australians is this: if you don't know how The Voice is going to work, vote no. Why? Because it's risky, it's unknown, it's divisive, and it's permanent.
What do we want? Yes! When do we want it? Now!
The campaign soon became increasingly toxic. At the Conservative Political Action Conference, one speaker mocked customary land acknowledgements.
I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, violent black men.
And there were comments like this from senior No campaigner Gary Johns.
If you want a voice, learn English.
That led a leading Yes campaigner, Professor Marcia Langton, to respond with a controversial remark of her own.
Every time the No case raises one of their arguments, if you start pulling it apart, you get down to base racism. I'm sorry to say it, but that's where it lands. Or just sheer stupidity.
One television presenter said Langton's comments had buried the Yes campaign by tarring half the electorate as racist and stupid. And those divisions were felt at the polling stations.
It's been extremely toxic, and I've been involved in politics for a long time, and I've never been at a polling booth and experienced so much abuse or intimidation. People standing over you, trying to take down and move your sign. Some horrid racial slurs.
I'm just handing out how to vote cards for the No campaign. The recognition is already there. There are 40 land councils, 350 different mobs. The Aboriginal people themselves refer to themselves as the mob. They don't agree on many things, so how are they going to represent each individual mob? They all have an individual culture, and it doesn't match together.
A victory for the No campaign won't just be a setback for the 80% of Indigenous people in Australia who want their voice in Parliament. According to the Lowy Institute, an Australian think tank, it could also forever taint Australia's global image. For CBC News, I'm Peter Hadfield in Sydney.
New Zealanders have also gone to the polls, voters swinging to the right in a general election that marks the definitive end to the Jacinda Ardern era.
New Zealanders have chosen change, and our new government will deliver it, and we will get this country back on track.
That's Christopher Luxon, a former business exec turned politician and New Zealand's next Prime Minister. Luxon and his centre-right National Party won over voters by promising financial relief for the middle class and to bring historically high inflation under control. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins, who took over after Ardern stepped down unexpectedly in January, has conceded. Ardern had landslide wins in 2017 and 2020, but the Labour Party has lost support since then over issues like New Zealand's long COVID-19 lockdown and the rising cost of living. Well, Canada's spy agency is concerned foreign adversaries could gain a foothold in Canada's north by offering to fund much-needed infrastructure projects. That's according to CSIS documents obtained by CBC News. A prominent Inuit leader says he has heard the warnings from CSIS, but says the spy agency was short on specifics. Catherine Tunney has that story.
Airplane propellers swirl, ready to depart Nain and northern Labrador on a sunny day. The airstrip has no lights, meaning night flights are impossible, even in emergencies. A reminder of the sometimes dire infrastructure gaps for those living in northern Canada.
Canada isn't built yet.
Natan Obed is president of Inuit Taproot Kanatami, which represents more than 65,000 Inuit.
There still is incredible infrastructure deficits in the Canadian Arctic, whether it be for airports or for marine facilities.
The question of who will step in and fund those types of projects is of interest to Canada's spy agency. According to documents obtained by CBC News, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service is focusing on the Arctic as China and Russia's interests in the region grow. The document shows CSIS is concerned about foreign interference through investment.
It's a great way to use oftentimes licit means to carry out illicit or even legal but injurious activities.
Casey Babb is an instructor at the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. He says foreign investment is a weapon in China's arsenal.
They use foreign investment as a door, as an entry point to gain access to markets, to gain access to governments.
Obed has concerns too.
We are making decisions every day that are currently not as informed as they could be.
But says his briefings with CSIS have been superficial, with no details shared about who is safe to partner with and who to avoid.
And especially if the Canadian government is not investing in infrastructure development in the Arctic, then it pushes our pursuit for partners in investment into other places.
CSIS did not comment on this story. By law, it can't share intelligence outside of the federal government. Public Safety Canada suggests amendments are coming to change that at some point. In the meantime, Obed says he's asked CSIS for security clearance to get a better picture of what's happening in his homeland. Catherine Tunney, CBC News, Ottawa.
Thousands of excited fans party outside India's Narendra Modi Stadium, celebrating their country's victory over their arch rivals Pakistan at the ICC Cricket World Cup. And it won't be the last time India wins, says this fan.
Until now, Pakistan have never beaten us in the World Cup, and they never will.
The cricket rivalry between India and Pakistan is one of the fiercest in any professional sport. For his thoughts on today's match, I spoke earlier to writer and cricket analyst Faraz Sarwat. Faraz, the India-Pakistan cricket rivalry is legendary, right? These matches are highly anticipated by millions and millions of fans. Did today's match live up to the hype?
Not really, no, because it ended up being a bit of a one-sided contest. India won the match quite comfortably. They put it in the largest cricket stadium in the world, the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad, India. And it was a sea of blue, which is the color of the Indian jersey. So it was quite a spectacle, no doubt about that.
And in the end, I mean, it seems like India won pretty easily, which they seem to do all the time when it comes to these two at the World Cup, right? How did they do it this time?
Well, the overall record between India and Pakistan is really in Pakistan's favor. They've won more games head-to-head. But the World Cup, for some reason, seems to be, something that they can't get past. The thing is that, cricket is a game between bat and ball. And usually, teams have one or two superstars. India doesn't really have any weak links in its bowling. And traditionally, the strength of the Indian side was in their batting, and the bowling was not always there. But now they've kind of covered that off pretty well. So there's no respite for a batting side that's facing India's bowlers. There's no weak link that you're kind of waiting for. So it's that relentless nature, I think, that's really helping India progress.
You mentioned the fans in the stands being a sea of blue in support of India. We'd heard this story that some Pakistan fans couldn't get visas to come to India, so they couldn't go to the game. How do you think that affected the outcome?
If you're in a stadium that is hostile to you and there's 130,000 people in that stadium, yeah, it's certainly going to have an impact. And it was interesting, when a cricket match starts, the two captains come out onto the field, they toss a coin. The captain that wins the coin toss decides whether his team is going to bat first or bowl first. And when the Pakistan captain's name was announced at the toss, he was booed. That doesn't really happen. They're professional players, they take it all in stride, but I would expect that there would be some impact of that. Now, for the first quarter of this game, about 25% of this game, Pakistan was doing quite well, and you could hear a pin drop in the stadium of 130,000. But, as soon as the tide turned, wow, it was something else.
When we talk about the intensity of this rivalry and of the fans, what is the pressure on these two teams to win?
It's immense. It's almost like your country's pride is on the line because you're representing your country. So the interesting thing about India-Pakistan is that it's really, a reflection of geopolitics, right? And cricket matches have tended to be a bit of a release valve for the tension. It's a war minus the shooting, people tend to say. And, the media revs it up. If you win, you're a hero, a demigod. If you lose, you're the worst person who ever walked the earth, So there's lots of pressure.
For all the hype and attention around this game, it is just one match of this tournament. Is there a team that you're watching that you expect to take it all?
So India look very strong. They are expected to win, but eventually in the semifinal or final, India are going to meet another strong team, and anything can happen on the day. South Africa have kind of surprised me a little bit. I always thought they were a good team, but I didn't expect them to be as dominant as they've been.
That win over Australia was massive.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm kind of keeping an eye on them. Like if they've got their house in order, they're kind of the dark horses, I'd say, to win the whole thing.
Well, watch this space. We'll have to see what happens. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That's writer and cricket analyst Faraz Sarwat. And that's it from The World This Weekend, this Saturday, October 14th. For more on our top stories, you can always go to CBCNews.ca. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Thank you for being with us.